Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video I'm bringing you a unique deck list that I created a couple of days ago. Just testing out some things and wanted to see if something like this would work. It is Ruby Amber, obviously, as you can see on screen here. We're going to be breaking down this deck list very quickly, and then I'll show you some matches against aggro decks in Ink Table. So it's going to be me versus AI for those of you that don't know. I will hopefully test this against, actual good opponents to see if this deck has any viability or what edits need to be made. But I'll only do that if you let me know in the comment section below that you want to see more of this. And again, you can skip ahead in the video if you want to actually see those matches, because as I've mentioned before, one of the testaments to see if a deck is going to be viable, in my opinion, is seeing how it does against Amber Steel Song and the aggro decks in the format. If you can bypass those two tests, it probably is a decent deck, assuming it doesn't just like auto lose to a mid-range deck or something like that. But we're going to be breaking this down. Let's do that very quickly, and then I'll kind of explain the concept behind it before we jump into those matches, which are very quick, by the way, so that's always good. But this is primarily a Ruby deck. 48 Ruby cards, only 13 Amber cards, 52 Inkables, only 9 non-Inkable cards, which makes this deck very friendly, very easy to play. 49 characters, so mostly characters. We've got 4 items, 4 actions, and 4 songs. The curve here is 8 1-drops in the Queen and Mulan, as you can see here, and then the 2, 3, and 4 kind of curve out nicely, so you should always have something to play on curve. Again, this is a theme of how I build my decks, and really how everybody builds their decks, I'm pretty sure, if you want it to be successful. And then we taper off into, again, niche like utility cards as we get to the top end of the curve here. So as noted, this deck is called Gaston and Maximus, so it's based around the new Gaston, Pure Paragon, and Maximus, again another new card from Shimmering Skies, Team Champion. When you have Maximus out with the Gaston, at the end of your turn you will gain 5 lore. If you have Maximus out with something like a boosted up character from the Queen that makes it above 5 but below 10 strength, you'll get at least 2 lore. If the Queen boosted up like a Maui boosted up to 10 strength, you will get the 5 lore, or boost up a Wreck-It Ralph, even though we only play one of it. But even the Queen boosting up something like a Rapunzel, which is a 1/5, or a Goofy, which is a 2/4, you will trigger the Maximus. So you can kind of see what we're going for here. It might seem like a little bit of a gimmick, but the deck is actually pretty good. It surprised me. But again, it's against AI, so you can't really say. We'll have to test it against real opponents to see if it really does have any viability. But the way that this curves out is, of course, we're playing 4 of the 1-drop Queen for a shift target in the on 2 for the 5-drop Queen. Sorry, on 2. We play 4 Mulans. Again, this is a character that comes into play with damage. So right away, if you play this out, it will allow you to play the Gaston for 2 less. Okay, but playing it for 7 still isn't great, right? Well, as we know with Amber Ruby, we like to play Mother Gothel as well because of Rapunzel. So this is another character that you can develop on curve that will reduce the Gaston by 2 more. So right away, your Gaston will now cost 5, in contention with costing the same as a Maui, but instead of being a 6/5 with Reckless, it's a 10/6 that quests for 2 and has Rush. So if you even develop on curve these 2 damage characters, or on 3 even develop further damage characters in the Beast, this can really let loose with this Gaston, right? And again, because you're likely going to be reacting to your opponent's board, or they're going to be doing stuff to your board, you may trade out a Mulan or a Mother Gothel, but ideally some of these cards with damage will stick for a couple of turns where you can proc the Gaston's reduction ability and get it out early. Getting out a Gaston on turn 5 as a 10/6 body is very, very good, very, very powerful. This thing should trade 2, 3, 4 for 1 potentially, right? Especially if you proc heal it with Rapunzel, it can be very, very powerful. All right, we're also playing Sisu on 3 as well as Flynn Riders. So playing out our 8 of each character, or each cost in the character slots. So 8 1-drops, 8 2-drop characters, 8 3-drop characters, 8 4-drop characters. We are playing the Super Goof, which synergizes very well with the Queen, and also just a nice other way to gain lore. And I've talked about this in my other videos. Non-questing sources of lore, like through the Maximus, through the Goofy, even through this Wreck-It Ralph, if you're able to bring back a Princess card, which will trigger with either the Mulan or the Rapunzel. If you bring it back from the discard into your hand, you'll get the 2 lore off the Ralph. Is very, very good. Again, I think this curve down here is fairly decent. You may not need to play Beast, but again, it's just another card to help you develop. If you don't see a Mulan or you don't see a Mother Gothel, at least you see the other one. So you have 2 out of 3 chances to develop damaged characters on board to proc the Gaston to come down on turn 5. Again, you don't always need to do that, but depending on the situation, it could be very powerful. Of course, there's going to be games where you'll want to play Queen, Shift Queen, and that's your turn 1, turn 2 play. So you don't develop Mulan and Mother Gothel, right? Or you aim to develop the Gaston later on in the game. But this card I think is very underrated. And again, you can just close out games instantly by just dropping Maximus. Like there's potential for you to drop Gaston and Maximus in the same turn. In some of my ink table matches, I think I had like 4 damage characters on board at one point, which means this thing costs 1 to drop. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And if you have 5 damage characters, this thing will cost 0, I guess, right? So pretty strong. Like, you may not need to play the Wreck-It Ralph. I just threw it in there as like a nice unique tech option. Getting back a Rapunzel in like a mid-range or endgame scenario can be very, very crucial. Obviously against aggro, this card is terrible. But again, you have enough tools in order to combat aggro. Things like the Flynn Rider still do a lot of work against it. You have these overstated bodies in Mulan and Mother Gothel that, yes, they do trade out with the aggro threats, which isn't the greatest, but they're going to run over anything, right? The fact that Gothel will trade out into a goat or a fox is very, very good. And then, like I said, you have the Sisu for extra strength, you know, because these cards are, well, you know, the Queen, the Flynn Rider, and the Beast, you're not going to use them for strength, really. But if you're able to heal up the Beast and you have the Queen up, like the Queen proccing Beast for the strength boost becomes a 6/6. Like, it's going to constantly run over a ton of stuff. And even as a 2/6, it's going to run over a lot of aggro threats anyways, and not even be phased by it with that 6 willpower. And it quests for 2, right? So this card is a little bit of a meta call against aggro, and still decent into other matchups as well. Like I said, you can proc it for a lot of strength, and it will survive. It will trade positively if you do get the interaction with the Queen. And then the same with Goofy, right? Goofy, even in isolation, is decent, but with the Queen, it becomes a powerhouse as well, especially since you can already have the Queen developed. You just drop the Goofy, then you quest with Queen, buff the Goofy, and then use Goofy to take out whatever you want, because it has Rush, very, very powerful, right? The Queen with all of these Rush characters, the Goofy, the Gaston, and the Maui. Not that you'd need a power boost on the Gaston, but you know, it definitely beefs it up so you can take out anything. In the aggro matchups, there was castles being dropped on me, I think, by the AI in one of the matches, and like I just dropped Gaston for like 3 or something, or 5, I forget. I just like ran over the castle like instantly. Like it was so free. But yeah, you'll see what I mean. In addition to you know, just insult to injury against aggro, but also obviously good against many decks, 4 brawls, and because you want to proc damage, of course, 4 Teeth and Ambitions. You know, being able to sing this and put damage on a Rapunzel, put damage on a Sisu, on a Goofy, you know, back on the Beast, back on the Gothel, because these are all high willpower characters, synergizes very well with this deck, and also helps you to continue to proc the Gaston, right? Your main source of draw is Rapunzel. This is a known drawback of this ink pairing, is that your only real hard card draw is the Rapunzel, but into the aggro matchups, if they're playing Amethyst Chromacon and you're drawing cards with them, you'll just, you know, you have better cards to deal with their threats, right? Especially since you have these 8 songs and actions in order to deal with their ready threats, and then you have a bunch of rush characters to slow them down, and you have a bunch of things that will gain you lore, like the Flynn Rider, the Goofy, and even the Maximus now, to close out the game ahead of them, right? So you'll be outstripping them in terms of the lore gain. Now, a little bit of a spicy take on my end. I'm trying out the Sword Release card, because obviously as soon as you drop that Gaston, there is nothing your opponent is going to have that's going to have more than 10 strength. So you will be proccing this ability every turn if that Gaston lives. Also, it will proc off the Maui, right? Because again, there's almost nothing that competes with Maui except for opposing Mauis. But this Gaston is primarily what you're going to use with the Sword Released here. And this thing being able to drain lore from your opponent every turn is really good into basically every matchup, right? Except for maybe like the Sapphire decks where they just Tamatoa for 20 in a single turn. But you know, by using Dime and then questing with Tamatoa if it survives. But again, you should be able to out Tamatoa hopefully some way or another. Yeah, I guess it would be questing, right, if it does drop, which isn't the greatest, and then you don't have item removal. So I guess in that scenario, you're just racing the Sapphire decks, right? Because I don't really see any other way that you really slow them down. But again, you have the tools to do it, I would hope. Like maybe that's one of the matchups we need to test. Anyways, to wrap up this deck profile here, the Dinner Bell is attempting to solve the other problem with Rapunzel. Obviously, in the aggro matchups, this card is completely dead. You don't necessarily ever want to develop this because you're constantly trying to deal with the aggro threats. But obviously, in more slower matchups, control-based matchups, mid-range matchups, this is where this card can come in handy because it's a constant resource on the board if it doesn't get outed to, again, just out a bunch of your damaged characters, things that you throw your rush characters into, things you put Teeth and Ambition damage on, etc. It synergizes just like Rapunzel. Yes, you pay 2, but you get a bunch of card draw, and as you're drawing into these rush characters, they do have enough staying power to turn the tide of a game, especially when you're pulling off multiple 2-for-1s in terms of card advantage. So that's the concept behind the deck, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of the matches and see how it performed. So for the next 6 matches, we're going to showcase this deck up against aggro. I go against Amber Amethyst, my personal list that I created, and then I think I just pulled the top Emerald Amethyst, which at the moment was Zan's. I don't know what happened to Artabax's list off of Dreamborn. But we go second in all the matches except for this first one, because I want to see how this deck does on the draw. And it does do pretty promising, but again, keep in mind that this is AI, so it's not going to make the most optimal plays every single time. But I figured if there was any deck I was going to test against AI, this is probably the best one, because aggro is still fairly simple. I mean, it still makes mistakes, like it sometimes played out a card before drawing off Chromacon when you're going to activate the Chromacon anyways. Little things like that. So again, take this with a grain of salt, but like I mentioned in the deck profile, if you do want to see me play this further against my testing partner when they're back tomorrow, let me know, because this deck does look like it does have some promise, as I explained in the deck profile, and I'm sure there are refinements that can be made to make this better. But yeah, let me know what you think. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up here and maybe put on some music for you in the background. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, and if you do end up watching the rest of it, thank you. But that's going to do it for me. Quantum is out.
you.